When you share a life with someone for 40 years, you think you know what the silence between you means. You think you can read the pauses, the sighs, the small habits that time turns into comfort. I used to believe silence meant peace. Now I know it can also mean hiding. The morning of my husband's funeral was cold enough to hurt. Tennessee mornings had that sharp honesty, the kind that doesn't let you pretend. The church smelled like lilies and lemon polish, the kind of cleanliness that tries to erase grief. They'd placed his photograph on a stand by the pulpit. The same photo we took for our 40th anniversary, him in his navy suit, smile soft and sure. I remember the photographer saying, "You two still look in love." And we did, or at least I thought we did. The pews filled fast. Neighbors, co-workers, old friends, and me, sitting in the front row with our daughter, Sarah. She held my hand so tightly that it trembled through both of us. Then, in the middle of the second hymn, the church doors opened again. Two people walked in. A woman about my age and a young man in his 20s. They didn't look lost. They looked expected. The woman's eyes met mine for a moment. Something in her gaze didn't ask permission. She didn't look away. And that was how I knew, before anyone told me anything, that my marriage was about to become a story I didn't recognize. After the service, people came up one by one, hugged me, said all the soft words people say when they don't know the right ones. The woman waited near the back, her hands folded like prayer, her son standing beside her, jaw set tight. When the crowd thinned, she stepped forward. "Mrs. Collins?" she said softly. I nodded. My name in her mouth sounded foreign. She said, "I'm sorry for your loss." Then she hesitated. Her voice changed, cracked slightly. "My name is Elaine." She glanced at the young man beside her. "This is Daniel, your husband's son." The words didn't hit like thunder. They landed quietly, like snow, soft, silent, but heavy enough to bury everything underneath. I remember hearing the clock in the hallway tick 3 times before I could breathe. Sarah said something. I think it was, "Mom?" But I couldn't turn my head. I just kept looking at the boy, at his eyes, the same gray-green as my husband's. That's when my knees gave out. Not from weakness, from truth. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Maybe you've had a moment like this, when the world stayed perfectly still, but something inside you split open quietly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of casseroles and condolences. People talked around me, not to me. By evening, the house was full of half-empty dishes and hollow words. I sat by his chair, the one he always read in, and stared at the folded newspaper still sitting on the armrest. The headline meant nothing. The photo above it wasn't his. But the silence between those two things was unbearable. That night, I found his old wallet in the drawer. Inside it, tucked behind a photo of me and Sarah at Dollywood, was another photograph. Smaller, creased, nearly faded. A younger woman. A little boy with the same gray-green eyes. My fingers went cold. It was dated 1991. We were still married, still taking Christmas pictures, still saying grace at the same table. I didn't cry. Not yet. tears required disbelief, and somehow this felt like something I had already known in the quiet places between years. If you've ever found a truth too heavy to carry all at once, hit the heart button. I just want to know you're out there, listening from somewhere. When I finally looked up, it was almost midnight. The house was still, except for the sound of rain. I remember whispering to the empty room, "How many lives can one man live?" The lamp flickered once, and in that light, I saw the photograph again, the small boy's face, and realized he was about the same age as Sarah. Half of his life belonged to me, and half to someone else. And all of it, somehow, was gone. If you're still here, stay close. I'll tell you what happened next, how I followed the quiet trail my husband left behind and found a truth that was cruel but necessary. Because even after 40 years, love can still hide things, and grief will make you brave enough to look. Grief has a strange way of rearranging your hearing. The day after the funeral, the house was quiet, but every silence had an echo, as if the walls were whispering what I wasn't ready to know. I could hear him in everything: the creak of the floor by the pantry, the rustle of his old flannel shirt when I brushed past it, the drawer that never closed all the way. But it wasn't memory. It was unfinished business. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boy's face, Daniel, and the woman's voice saying, "I'm sorry for your loss." By morning, the coffee pot was half empty and the rain had stopped. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph I'd found in his wallet. The edges had worn smooth, like something handled too many times to forget. That's when I saw it. A faint blue stamp on the back. Dayton, Tennessee, Photo Express. We'd never been to Dayton. If you're still listening, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because sometimes finding the truth starts with something as small as a corner of ink. I drove there the next day. It's about 2 hours from our town, long enough to think, short enough for doubt to keep up with you. The road curved through green hills and half-empty farms, each fence line like a sentence in a story I hadn't finished reading. When I reached Dayton, I found the shop still standing, though the sign had faded to ghost letters. Inside, an old man looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I held out the photo. "Do you remember this mark?" He squinted, then smiled faintly. "That's my old stamp. I took that photo myself. Oh, must have been 91 or so." My throat tightened. I pointed at the boy. "Do you remember him?" He frowned, then nodded slowly. "That man, his daddy, came in often. Said his name was Jim." Jim. Not James Collins, not my husband, just Jim. I thanked him and left before my voice could break. Back in the car, I sat there with the engine off. I could still hear the old man saying it. His daddy came in often. That meant it wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a life, parallel to mine. Same seasons, same man. That night, I took out every box in the closet. Receipts, letters, photographs. I made neat piles, not out of anger, but order. Order is how you breathe when you've been lied to. At the bottom of one box was a small, sealed envelope. No return address, just my husband's handwriting for when you need to know.
It was dated 10 years ago.
If you've ever held something you're not ready to open, but can't put down either, you'll understand what that envelope felt like in my hand. If you do, click the heart so I know you're out there. I sat in the chair by the window, listening to the night insects hum outside. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter, folded once, and a single Polaroid of the same woman, Elaine, standing with two boys beside a blue house. The letter read, "If you're reading this, Ruth, I failed you in the way good men sometimes fail when they're too weak to face themselves. I never stopped loving you, but I made promises I couldn't unmake, and lives don't always fit neatly into one home. There's another family, not because I wanted less for you, but because I wanted more for them. I was wrong, but I couldn't undo it without destroying you too." I stopped reading there. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from the cruelty of soft words written too late. The next morning, I took a walk down by the creek. That's where we used to go fishing on Sundays. He'd bait the hook for me, say, "Patience, Ruth. The quiet is part of it." I used to think he meant fishing. Now I think he meant secrets. I decided not to tell Sarah yet, not until I knew how deep the truth went. Instead, I wrote to Aline. Her address was on the funeral guest book. All I said was, "We need to talk, woman to woman." If you're still listening, maybe leave me a comment. What would you do? Would you call her? Would you forgive her? Or would you walk away? A week later, I received a letter back, handwritten, careful, the kind of letter that feels like it's been crying before it reaches you. "Dear Mrs. Collins, I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I thought he would tell you himself. We met before you were married. He left us, me and the boys, and then came back years later. Said he was alone. I didn't know you were still alive." Alive. The word twisted in my chest. To her, I wasn't a wife. I was a ghost he'd buried in convenience. She ended the letter with, "Daniel would like to meet you. He doesn't blame you for anything." That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair, same silence, but something in me had shifted. The shock had cooled into understanding, and understanding has teeth. I realized I wasn't grieving the man I lost. I was grieving the illusion I'd loved. If you've ever had your life split into two stories, the one you lived and the one you never knew, stay with me. Because the hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was what came next. I will tell you what happened when I met the boy, the man who carried my husband's eyes and my unanswered questions. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger. It was something much quieter and somehow more holy. There are certain drives you never forget. The one to your wedding, the one to the hospital when your first child is born, and the one where you go to meet the people who shared your husband's heart. I drove to Dayton again, this time under a soft April sky. The fields were beginning to bloom, wildflowers scattered like apologies no one knew how to say. In the passenger seat, I carried the letter Elaine had written. It felt heavier than the steering wheel. She'd given me an address, blue house, white porch, same as the Polaroid. I parked at the curb and just sat there for a minute. The house looked ordinary, small, clean, kind. The sort of place where children once left their bikes in the yard. Through the lace curtains, I saw movement. Then the door opened. Elaine stepped out first. Older now, gray streaks in her hair, eyes soft but uncertain. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. "Ruth?" she said. "Just my name. No title. No pretense. Yes." My voice sounded calmer than I felt. It's strange how, when you've lost everything, your dignity becomes your only steady thing to hold. We sat on the porch. Two women with the same history, but different chapters. Her hands were folded in her lap, mine gripping my coffee cup so tight I could hear the china creak. "She never wanted to hurt you," she said finally. "I thought he was divorced. When I found out he wasn't, I couldn't undo what had been done." I didn't answer. The truth didn't need my permission. She continued quietly. "He left for a while after Daniel was born, said he had to take care of things back home. He sent money for a few years, then came back, said his wife had died." "I hadn't," I said. She flinched. "I know," she whispered. "I found out years later. By then, it was too late. If you're listening, tell me in the comments what forgiveness means to you, because I'm still not sure. I think it changes shape, depending on who's asking for it." Daniel came out then. Taller than I expected. Late 20s maybe, early 30s. He had the same quiet confidence that used to make people trust my husband immediately. He looked at me for a long time, like someone trying to see a reflection in still water. "Mrs. Collins?" "Yes." "He wanted to meet you. I didn't know he had another family until I was grown." His voice broke slightly. "He used to tell stories about a farm, about fishing, about a daughter named Sarah. I thought they were just made up." Sarah. Hearing her name from his lips made something in me tighten and soften at once. "He wasn't cruel," Daniel said. "He just compartmentalized. He had this way of living two lives, like parallel lines that never touched." We sat there in silence. Three people orbiting a ghost. The afternoon light stretched across the porch, painting everything in that gold that only lasts a few minutes, long enough to make even the hardest truths look soft. Finally, I said, "I used to think love was about being chosen every day. Now I think it's about what you can live with when you're not." Daniel nodded slowly, tears pooling in his eyes. He said, "I didn't come here for answers. He just wanted to know what part of him was good." I looked at him, and all at once I saw it. The same kindness in his eyes that had drawn me to his father 40 years ago. "You," I said, "you're the part that was good." He exhaled shakily, and for a moment I could have sworn I felt my husband there. Somewhere between us, regret and grace breathing the same air. Elaine touched my hand then, her skin cool, trembling. She asked, "Do you hate me?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said softly. "I think I pity us both. We built our lives around a man who couldn't build a bridge between two truths." She nodded, eyes wet. "Maybe now we can." If you've ever looked at someone who shares your pain instead of causing it, hit the like button. Sometimes grace is quieter than anger, and it's harder to hold. Before I left, Daniel asked if he could show me something. We walked to the small backyard. There was an old oak tree with a wooden swing hanging from it. He said he built this for us when I was 10. He said it was the same kind he built for Sarah. I smiled faintly. I said he was good with his hands, just not with his honesty. Daniel laughed through tears. Maybe that's why he built things that didn't talk back. We stood there in the soft wind, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply tired of being haunted by someone else's choices. As I got into my car, Elaine said, "You're welcome here any time." I nodded. I said, "I might come back, but not for him, for closure. She understood. And that's when I realized closure isn't a door closing. It's learning to leave it open without waiting for footsteps. If you're still listening, stay with me. Because the final part of this story isn't about loss. It's about what happens when truth sets you free and you finally learn who you are without the lies holding you together. When you've lived through betrayal, you start to understand silence differently. It's not empty anymore. It's space. Space where the truth can breathe without hurting you. After I left Dayton, I drove the long road home with the windows down. The spring air was thick with honeysuckle. I didn't listen to music, didn't cry, didn't talk to myself. I just let the hum of the tires carry the weight for me. By the time I reached my driveway, the sun was low, that amber hour where everything looks forgiving, even the past. The mailbox flag was up. Inside was a letter from Daniel. Mrs. Collins, thank you for meeting me. I didn't expect kindness, but you gave it anyway. I've decided to visit his grave next week, not to forgive him, but to finally talk to him. I hope one day you'll come too. I folded it carefully, slid it into my Bible between Psalms and Proverbs, the chapters about loss and wisdom. Sarah came by that evening with a casserole, because daughters never stop mothering their mothers. She sat across from me, fork untouched, watching my face. "Mom," she said finally, "you've been somewhere far away, even when you're right here. Is there something I should know?" I looked at her for a long time. She had his eyes too, but not his secrets. "There's something you shouldn't have to know, but I'll tell you anyway." I told her everything, about Aline, about Daniel, about the letter and the funeral, and the years of silence that weren't silence at all. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp. She just listened, her hand over mine, like she'd been bracing her whole life for this moment without knowing why. When I finished, she whispered, "So there are two of us?" I nodded, yes, and neither of us knew the other existed. She leaned back, eyes full of tears, then said something I'll never forget. "Then we should fix that. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Because healing doesn't happen alone. It happens when someone decides to sit beside you in the truth." The next week, Sarah and I drove back to Dayton. We brought flowers, not lilies this time, but sunflowers, because I was tired of grief pretending to be elegant. Elaine and Daniel were already there at the graveyard. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. Like four people finally letting go of someone they'd been holding too tightly. We placed the flowers together. Daniel whispered something under his breath. A prayer or a goodbye, I couldn't tell. Then Sarah stepped forward and said softly, "He was my dad too." Elaine reached out and took her hand. They stood like that, two women bound by the same man, and for the first time, I didn't feel jealousy or anger. I felt completion. We weren't rivals, we were witnesses. If you've ever had to make peace with a ghost, hit the heart so I know you understand. Sometimes forgiveness is just choosing to stop bleeding. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table one last time, took out my own envelope, and wrote, "James, I loved you once in full color. You faded in shades of gray. I forgive you, but not for you, for me, because I deserve peace more than you deserved silence. And if there's a heaven that takes both sinners and fools, maybe I'll see you there, not as husband and wife, but as two souls who finally learned what honesty costs." I placed it in the drawer beneath the old wedding photograph, the same drawer that once held his secrets. Summer came. The house felt different now, lighter, somehow. I started teaching piano again. Daniel came by once, brought his guitar. Sarah joined us, laughing at how bad I was at keeping tempo. We didn't talk about him. We didn't need to. He was the reason we met, but he wasn't the reason we stayed. Sometimes at dusk, I sit on the porch and watch the sky turn that same soft gray-green as his eyes, and I think about all the versions of love, the one that lies, the one that breaks, and the one that learns how to stay kind anyway. That last one is mine now. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found a truth that almost broke you, but somehow set you free instead? Because here on True Life Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Subscribe, stay with us, and help the silence end, one true story at a time.